question is for Matt. Matt, can you talk about the writing process and in particular how much of the novel and original movie you incorporated or decided not to incorporate? Thank you.
Sure. I mean, you know, the thing about it is that the novel, if you made the novel into a film and you did everything in it, you would have an amazing 10-hour miniseries. It would be like a Stephen King, like, masterpiece, you know, cinema story. And so I think, you know, that the original story was, I think, brilliantly adapted by Lindquist. He wrote the script. And in reading the book, there were details I wanted to bring in. And I brought, actually one thing in particular he said to me, I remember he said to me, you know, because I really wanted to focus on the way he had smartly done the Romeo and Juliet story of Oscar and Ellie. And so I really wanted to put everything, in fact, even more through that point of view. And I tried to filter things, even the subplots, through that point of view, so that the way you would meet Virginia, let's say, would be the way that Cody might see her through his window, through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy looking out into the world of adults and not understanding them and discovering sort of what sexuality is and all of that, and seeing, you know, people, you know, adults fight and not understanding it and it all being very confusing, because that's, I think, what it feels like to be a 12-year-old. And so there's kind of this sort of rear window aspect, I think, to a certain part of Cody's character in the movie, and he watches. And that's something that was sort of taken from, in the book, they all live sort of in a complex of buildings, and they can kind of, you know, I imagine that they could see each other. And there was one detail that, though it's even more immersed in Owen's point of view, Oscar's point of view, than the original film, that Lindquist did say to me, he said, you know, one thing I'm also really excited about is the notion that maybe someday we might get to see Virginia suck her own blood, which is one of the things from the novel that's particularly startling. And so I said, well, no matter what, we're going to get that in the movie. So there are details like that I took. There are elements from the police story. There's a character named Staffen, whose character I tried to incorporate. Elias Koteas plays the character, and he's just wonderful. And a lot of details about, you know, Owen's sort of candy obsession came from the book, but it was a candy that I loved called Now and Laters, and a lot of details like that. I'd say that it's very faithful to the structure, in a way, of the original film, in that I thought it was a good adaptation, a brilliant adaptation of his book, but I wanted to bring in some more detail. And the last aspect of that is that we have lots of details taken from the book that are sort of inspirations for things, and there's a lot of stuff that really is taken verbatim, which is in the structure of the original screenplay to the Swedish film, but I wanted to also add lots of things that came from my own sort of personal experience of growing up in that period, and to try and put it through that prism. So it's sort of this weird amalgam of stuff that's, you know, very much from the structure of the original story of the film, stuff from the book, and stuff from sort of my own sort of personal interpretation of that period of my life, or the, you know, what United States was like at that time. So it's sort of a weird amalgam of things. I'm anxious to see what people think.
This question is for Chloe. I was wondering if you could talk about any of the challenges you had from roles, transitioning to roles from like Kick-Ass to as far back as Amityville Horror to this new role, Let Me In.
Well, I like to try and choose very diverse roles from what I've done before. And I definitely say that just between Kick-Ass and Let Me In, I'd say that Hit Girl compared to Abby are actually very similar in a kind of twisted way. They're both very, very, very strong girls. One, of course, is, you know, about 200 years older than the other, but they're both very strong, and they know what they want, and they're very mature, and I don't know, you know, I just try and choose very diverse roles, and I like getting very involved in, you know, trying to figure out the backstory about my characters. Like, for instance, Abby. Me and Matt came up with this whole crazy, twisted plot line.
You know, one of the things that Steven Spielberg, also the other tip that he gave me, when I first was trying to do the movie, I had never actually worked with young actors before to the degree that we would be doing in this film. So JJ had said to me, hey, you know, Spielberg loved Cloverfield, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then when I was doing this, I was like, you know, JJ, do you think you could ask Steven Spielberg if I could talk to him about working with kids, because he'd made so many films that affected me in my childhood that were centered around kids. E.T. was just a film that affected me deeply, and Steven Spielberg was very, very generous, and one of the tips he gave me was, he said, you know, one thing I love to do, first of all, let them come up with stuff that makes you choose what you're going to do, because they are 12, and one of the things he told me was, have them keep a journal in character, and that's one of the things that we did actually, and so Chloe and Kodi would write from the point of view of their character. The only condition was they could write anything they wanted, but the only condition was that they had to share it with me. And so that's one of the things that we did at the beginning of this. And I found out actually that's one of the things that Kodi likes to do when he's preparing for a character. So that was, but we did have all those backstories she's talking about.
My question is for the cast. I was wondering if you've seen the original film, and also if you have, did the performances in that film inform your performances in this one?
Well, I didn't see the film before we did the movie, but I did see it afterwards, and I did see some things that were the same, just coincidence, but that film is awesome, and I just want to say hopefully people like this one as much as that one.
Yeah, yes, I saw the original, but I watched it after we were through filming, so.
I still haven't seen the original film, but my mom won't really let me watch the whole film yet. But I have seen parts of it, and what I have seen is a really amazing, phenomenal movie. So, you know, we took our take on it, and I really didn't, you know, want to watch it before I did my character because I wanted to have a different take on Abby.
You know, I specifically asked anybody in the film who was involved who hadn't seen the movie, these guys, and also our crew, not to see the movie if they hadn't been lucky enough to see it. And our director of photography, Greg Fraser, who's an amazing director of photography, he hadn't seen it, and I wanted us to be able to approach that story fresh. And so one of the ways of doing that was asking people who hadn't seen the film to not see it. And then I said to them, but the first thing you must do when we finish is watch the movie. And so.
We have time for one last quick question.
My question is for Matt Reeves. Do you use any material from the novel to elaborate on Ellie's gender ambiguity or her past?
No, not really. I mean, the thing about it is, like I was saying earlier, if you were to adapt the novel in its full complexity, I mean, you know, also not only her gender identity, but also like Hakan's full character and all of the very, very dark and amazingly twisted but beautiful stuff about his character, it would be, first of all, it would be a different movie. But in the case of this, I felt that detail, when I saw the original film and the moment that you're talking about occurs, I interpreted it my own way. I thought, oh, this is a coming-of-age moment, and he's fascinated with her sexuality. I didn't quite read for me what that was. And I talked to a lot of people who had that sort of similar reaction, and it was only upon reading the book that I got that additional richness that came from what's in the book. And in adapting it, one of the things that I just didn't want to include that particular moment, but I also haven't included anything in the film, other than not including that shot, that says that interpretation for people who are loving that in the book, the film could still be interpreted that way. You have the moment where Kodi is watching her, you don't know exactly what she sees, it doesn't conflict with that interpretation, but it's not something that we did. I didn't even know that was something we necessarily could get in the film because of the graphic nature of it.
Well, I want to thank the cast of Let Me In for joining us today. Chloe Moretz, Richard Jenkins, Kodi-Smith McPhee. And I want to thank the writer-director Matt Reeves for bringing you the clips today, and Overture Films and Hammer Films. This will be in theaters October 1st. Thank you guys for coming.
Once again, for Let Me In. Once again, for Let Me In. Give a round of applause.